When did you watch someone's sanity slowly deteriorate? My grandmother was brilliant and so dedicated to educating herself. She had a library of probably 1,000 books, but regularly circulated and bought new ones and sold ones she didn't need anymore. She read the paper every day, and when a topic interested her, she would cut out the article and summarize what caught her attention. Then she would file it in one of her enormous filing cabinets with other articles about it, and make notes of how the new article related to what was already there. She lived in a college town for decades and was friends with many of the professors. They would often come to discuss things of interest to her or them, including music, art and history professors. Every month she would create a mini museum exhibition on her dining room table. Wood carvings from around the world or different things made from lead with little catalog cards for every item. I have a 3-page discussion she researched and wrote about the proper times to use baptized and baptized. The first sign was that we were watching a documentary about Apollo 13 and she didn't remember it happening. She didn't know that it happened at all. There is zero chance that she didn't follow it as it was happening in her life. Not only was she well informed, but had a collection of Life magazines about the space program, and zero chance that she didn't hear about it afterward. She just didn't remember it at all. A little later, she was trying to play with Lego Duplo blocks with my daughter and couldn't figure out how they worked. She tried putting the same colors together, the same sizes, sliding the smooth sides against each other, putting the pegs against each other. She was so methodical in her trial and error and just couldn't get it. In her later years, she just sat in bed, measuring her sheets with her arms, trying to decide if there was enough fabric to make a dress or an apron. At the end she remembered that reading was a good thing, even though she couldn't and didn't have the attention to listen. And she hated my dad, her son-in-law. She never forgot that. Forgot my mom, but not how much she hated my dad. Jesus. This one is scary to me cause even if someone takes care of themselves mentally they can still bite the big one later on for no reason. Sorry you had to see such a thing. I worked in a care facility for people who suffer from dementia. This was a very rewarding and enjoyable job, but at times it could be confronting and sad, as you'd expect. One story that stuck with me was this lady who'd write in her booklet and always left it open. She didn't care to keep it a secret or anything, but I would make sure to keep personal possessions private as much as I could while cleaning the rooms. So I'd close the little book and put it in her desk where she could find it. It's something I could relate to. I have my own little books and enjoy writing as well, and appreciate it when people respect my privacy. I wouldn't read the contents, but I saw the phrases go from sentences to repeated words to scribbles. Eventually, she became too confused to put pen to paper, opening and closing the booklet, carefully touching the paper, but she couldn't quite figure it out anymore, eventually giving up. This really hit home to me, as I knew how therapeutic it could be to organize your thoughts on paper. I write when I'm sad or overwhelmed. The thought of her being unable to when she might have needed the outlet still stings. My sister passed away earlier this year, and she was sick for a long time. During the last few months you could tell that it was becoming harder for her to think and respond. Paradoxically, it actually made her a lot nicer to me. We had never had a great relationship and I always believed she hated me, but during those last few months she said very few unkind things to me. It was hard to know that the only time we ever really got along was right before she passed away. A longtime friend of mine started talking to me about some metaphysical theories he had. We used to smoke weed and talk about philosophy when we were younger, so it wasn't a shock to me. Then he wrote a paper that was dozens of pages long on his new theory of reality. He sent it to me, and when I said it gave me a headache to try and read it, he assumed that meant I was understanding it. Every time I saw him after that, his behavior was more and more manic. I don't know if everyone gets these feelings, but one can tell when talking to some people that they're just slightly off. Anyhow, he was apparently harassing some of his old flames and acting strangely enough that his family had him taken to the hospital, where he had visited a few times in the past few weeks. The hospital held him overnight and released him because he wasn't a threat. A few days later he started acting out in his mother's house and broke a window. She called the cops and they arrested him. The window was worth more than the amount required to make it a felony and he went to jail for 6 months. 2 days inside jail and has back to normal. Why? Exclamation mark. Well, he has a degenerative disease that puts him in constant pain. He couldn't afford his pain meds, and when he went to the hospital, they refused to give him any because they assumed he was a junkie. He had prior drug issues, if you can imagine. Closed bracket. He had lost his job, was living in a cold, damp apartment without electricity and couldn't get the meds he needed, so he descended over the course of a month into someone that literally thought Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking to him personally through the internet. Once he had his meds again, pain meds not antipsychotics, he leveled out and spent 6 MOs trying to piece together what the duck had happened to him. Super nice guy, has been fine for a couple years. Had to make some very elaborate apologies. It was uncomfortable to watch. I was living elsewhere at the time, but I heard about what happened to my friend. He was fairly normal, a little exceptional actually, as he was being scouted to get sponsored for skateboarding. Something he was very good at. He started acting really weird though. Things like opening his door just a bit when people came over and laughing at them. Throwing chairs and such around when at people's houses. Lying about things that were really obvious. Reading loudly from the Bible while wearing almost nothing outside in the middle of winter. Turns out he was schizophrenic. Last time I saw him was after I moved back and was living in a bad neighborhood. He was homeless, as was his dad who was with him. He didn't even recognize me, just acted really scared that I was trying to talk to him. No one has seen or heard from him since then. I'm the last person to have seen him. That was 10 years ago. Watched my grandfather slowly sink into Alzheimer's. By the end he didn't know my name or his own. He was sad and angry and confused. I watched every week as he forgot a little more, got a little more belligerent, a little more lost, until one day I walked in and he started screaming that someone was there to rob him. It was the saddest ducking thing I've ever seen. I have such vivid memories of watching him, and my uncles have such animated debates about politics and movies and sports. They used to play Risk until the sun came up listening to Sinatra. He would sit and explain every single play in a baseball game to me as a kid. He was sharp as duck, and the saddest and hardest part was watching the struggle on his face to remember. The frustration he felt, like he was letting us down. I miss him a lot. I was in high school and my best friend went from a normal guy who we would smoke weed occasionally, listen to music and have fun. It went to this obsession with a girl that clearly has no interest in him. He would literally stalk her, try to win her over. At the same time, he wasn't keeping up with hygiene and went from a decent student to a poor performer. One day, he mentioned that he wanted to commit suicide, so I told my parents everything that was going on. His parents were extremely well educated, but weren't doing anything about his behaviors. My parents talked to his, and they took it serious after hearing about the thoughts of suicide. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Nearly 40 years later, he still doesn't look the same. Really sad situation. I still miss him. I watched my ex-wife slowly spiral down, and I didn't even realize it. She was never really stable and had a family history of mental illness. Apparently she started cheating on me and never had the strength to tell me or get a divorce, and the constant lying and being on edge that I would find out at any minute really got to her. This was over the course of a year. Towards the end she would rock every time she sat and bit her nails till they bled. Currently she is maximumed out on a host of meds, and it takes everything she has to got to work as a janitor and come home. Her father is her guardian and helps her pay bills and stuff. She often denies past events or alters them if they were unpleasant. She is very adamant that they are real. Her father broke down and told me this a month ago and actually recommend that I not encourage our kids to visit her. I would never prevent them from seeing their mother. So in the course of 5 years she went from a fit dental hygienist with a promising career and host of friends to an overweight janitor with no friends, who can't even pay her own rent or buy groceries. I do admire her for going to work every day and trying. My wife died of cancer 3 months ago. There were serious metastases to the brain, a baseball, a pair of golf balls and some other smaller pockets of disease. My wife was an intellectual badass, held a doctorate, played concert piano, and had an uncanny ability to make correct political decisions. Badass. In the 8 to 10 weeks leading up to her death, she slowly lost her ability to speak and perform executive functions, sometimes in very interesting ways. The one I remember most was when she wanted a bowl of cereal. She had all the steps correct, but they were performed in the wrong order, so she poured the milk directly on the counter, then got a bowl, then turned the cereal box upside down. It was still closed, then got confused because she couldn't find the opening of the box. It was no longer at the top. All the while milk was dripping on the floor. Terrible and fascinating. By the end, she couldn't feed herself because she couldn't remember where her mouth was. In the last 2 weeks, all she could do was cry like a 3-year-old. I miss her terribly. My ex-best friend over the course of this past year has gone from a normal, well-adjusted woman who held down a full-time job and a very nice apartment to constantly being online and talking about how humans are just slaves to an alien race that lives on Mars and how reality doesn't exist, and if she died none of it would matter because reality doesn't exist. I don't talk to her anymore because if I said anything in opposition, she would lose her shit on me. Very different from the kind, compassionate woman I was best friends with for 4 years. I miss her every day. Disclaimer, I know she's doing well. She has a great familial support system and other friends that agree with her beliefs. I just couldn't be one of them anymore. My dad died of cirrhosis when I was 17. He was 45. He was, by all counts, a good father, caring, loved exposing us to wonderful art and hilarious comedies. But he drank a lot. About a year before he passed is when I noticed a change. Paranoid delusions. Talking to people not there. I'd come home from school to find Mormon missionaries that he had let in. Sometimes Jehovah's Witnesses. They were all taking advantage of him, and he'd kick them out every time. He was a staunch atheist. Then the violence started. Burst into my room just to punch me in the face while I'm sleeping. He tried to light the apartment on fire twice. On my 17th birthday he called my a cunt to her face and threw his drink at her. We ended up in fisticuffs again. He also just looked insane. Yellow skin, yellow eyes, super skinny. He couldn't walk, so he had 2 canes that he used violently. He died that year, the summer before my senior year of high school, leaving me homeless, but I was in the best place I could be. He was gone and never coming back. It's been 23 years and I hate to think of the life I would have if he never died. My younger brother died from a drug overdose last month. He used for the first time in March. In 7 short months I watched my best friend become someone I didn't recognize. Someone I couldn't even hold a conversation with anymore. It wasn't a slow deterioration. It was a meteoric descent into a drug-fueled madness. He lied about anything and everything. Even things that made 0 sense to lie about. Used nicknames from our childhood that we hadn't used in years. Would forget what we were talking about mid-conversation. It was like he was replaced with a near identical, but slightly off version of my brother. It wasn't still as heartbreaking. I mourn him, but at the end I didn't know him anymore. Edit. So first and foremost I want to thank everyone for the kind words. It means a lot. This is the hardest time of my life and I know what loss is. To answer some questions, he was using fentanyl, not heroin or meth. We did not understand the severity of it until it was too late. In a lucid moment he told me he knew he was addicted by the 3rd time he used. He came from a loving home, but we lost our father in our teenage years and I believe he never dealt with it. It hung over him. Edit 2. Seriously, I wasn't expecting this response. I'm overwhelmed by the kindness. To put people's minds at ease, I have a very strong support network around me and plenty of people to talk to. I appreciate everything. I will be okay. As with all things, I just need time. Thank you. Fucking hell, this was painful. I've got 2 younger brothers and I feel like the mentally ill / drug fueled older brother who's not good enough to be the older brother cause I'm too unstable. Though thankfully the drugs have been quit, I'm not back mentally. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. If I could I'd give you a hug. I'm crying and I wanna hug the pain out of you. My mom started going to online blogs and web radio shows about ghosts, aliens, conspiracies and took it all at face value. I saw my normal mom turn into a complete, gullible ignoramus in a matter of months. Nobody could talk to her without her bringing up FEMA death camps, potential economic collapse, aliens, anti-vax or Obama signing more executive orders than any president in history. Her friends thought she might have a brain tumor. She didn't. She did have cancer she was hiding / ignoring. That ended up killing her. BC she thought cancer wasn't real. This is what happens to lonely people that are looking for a connection. They'll believe anything just to feel that they are a part of something. It was very sad that she was so unbearable the last couple years of her life. My own. A few years ago I started acting erratically. Quit my good job out of nowhere. Started drinking constantly, blacking out and doing strange and dangerous things. The reason was I had begun hearing and seeing things that did not exist. At first it was sounds like a crash from the other room. Thinking my partner had said something he didn't. Thinking it heard the doorbell. Then it changed to constantly hearing what was like a radio being played right behind my head. The stations constantly being switched, static. Talk shows, music, strange foreign language conversations, commercials, sound effects that would come in louder than the others and make me jump out of my skin. Those were so loud, it felt like my head was literally exploding. I started drinking to kill the sounds, but it only made things worse. I began to see human figures everywhere, always coming closer to me when I'd glance away then look back at them. Sitting in my car, peeking out at me from behind trees, squatting beside my porch, peering in my windows. Everywhere it looked the people were there. I began staying up for days on end to watch them. I needed medical attention, but could not seek it because I quit my job, lost my insurance and cash flow. I had always been able to rely on my mind. If I could trust nothing else, my brain was the thing that would never lie to me. I felt betrayed by my own body. It was just the most terrible feeling. The tipping point was when I started barricading myself in the bathroom with my handgun because I kept seeing the people on my security cameras trying to break into the house. Feed stopped simply hiding ominously and begun to attack my house violently and crawl in windows. I'd just hide in my bathtub all day and keep my eyes glued to the security camera app on my phone, weeping, terrified, and slugging down liquor with the gun pointed at the door waiting for the people to bust in. The auditory hallucinations were so loud at this point, I would just scream, cry, and crank music to try and drown it out. It got so bad one day, I held the barrel of the gun to my temple and just sat there for a very long time deciding what to do. When I tried to pull the trigger, the gun was jammed. That day, I relinquished my guns to my mother and sought psychiatric help. I'm now thoroughly medicated, in regular therapy, and could not be happier I did get help. Anytime I think back to that day, I get sick to my stomach knowing that I almost ended the life I love living so much. The fall into insanity was terrifying. Health Coworker. I'm actively watching it happen to myself and coworkers through this pandemic. People can't concentrate, forget things, pause mid-task desperately trying to remember what they needed to do. Tempers flare over minor things. I've heard coworkers crying in the bathroom. Anxiety attacks in the middle of a shift. Immense anger towards employers and the politicians that control them. Sick calls are through the roof. Levels never before seen. Almost 10% of our staff are gone on long-term stress leave since March alone. And that's on top of the sick, call-ins and people that have straight up quit. Close bracket. The terror of any minute catching a cough and ending up positive combined with hospital wards overflowing with patients. Death. Everywhere you turn. And a society that tells us we're all stupid sheep and lying is driving us to insanity. We're also close to the breaking point. It's obscene. Every day I go into work I don't know if I'm going to have a breakdown so severe I can't function. It's madness. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.